In this lesson, you will learn how to navigate your way around the airport, where to find taxiway signs and markings, and what a typical taxi clearance will sound like. A typical taxi route brings the airplane from the ramp to the runway, and later back to the ramp. Pilots taxiing airplanes must observe the signs and painted markings that direct and help them navigate around the airport. To differentiate a runway from a taxiway, taxiways are given letter designators as opposed to number designators and are painted with yellow markings instead of white ones. Taxiways will have a solid yellow stripe to mark the center of the taxiway, and at larger airports, solid double yellow lines will mark the edge. To help you get where you're going, airports use taxiway signs and markings. The signs are posted to the side of the taxiway. Sometimes, markings will be painted on the taxiway surface. They are used when regular signs do not exist or to supplement the signs. Taxiway location signs have a black background with yellow text and a yellow border. They show you the designation of the taxiway that you are currently on. Often, you will see these signs in conjunction with direction signs or runway position holding signs. Direction signs have a yellow background with black text. The text indicates the designation of each intersecting taxiway and includes an arrow pointing in the direction of the turn required to get onto that taxiway. When a taxiway comes in contact with a runway holding position markings, commonly referred to as hold short lines, are used. These markings identify where an aircraft is supposed to stop when approaching a runway. They consist of 4 yellow lines, 2 solid and 2 dashed, extending across the width of the taxiway. The solid lines are always on the side where the aircraft is supposed to hold. This means that the solid lines are on the taxiway side, and the dashed lines are on the runway side. When approaching these markings, if you are on the side with solid lines, you must have permission to cross the hold short line. If you are instead on the side with the dashed lines, no permission is needed to cross, and you should make sure the entire airplane is past the double solid yellow lines before stopping. To coincide with these hold lines, airports may use an enhanced taxiway centerline. This enhanced centerline consists of parallel dashed yellow lines painted on each side of the centerline, and is used up to 150 feet prior to a runway. This warns the pilot that they are approaching a runway holding position marking or hold short line and may need to stop. Additionally, some runway crossings include yellow, flashing, elevated guard lights or in-pavement hold lights to help pilots identify these critical locations. Of course, all of these signs and markings won't do you much good if you don't know where you're supposed to go. When flying at a non-towered airport, you will be expected to determine which runway is in use by determining the wind direction, listening to the common traffic advisory frequency, or simply watching out for traffic in the pattern. Once you have determined the runway in use, it will be up to you to figure out which route to follow to get to the approach end of the runway for takeoff. If you are flying out of an airport with an operating control tower, you will be required to get taxi instructions prior to taxiing to the active runway. Typically, ground control will give you the most direct taxi route available to the runway. The taxi clearance is organized as follows. First, you will be assigned your taxi destination. If you are taxiing out for takeoff, this will most likely be a runway assignment. At larger airports like Daytona Beach, you may also receive a taxiway assignment along with the runway. This means that you will be doing an intersection takeoff instead of utilizing the entire length of the runway. After your destination assignment, you will receive the route to follow to your destination. This will consist of the taxiways that you need to use to get to your destination. Typically, the controller will not tell you whether you need to turn left or right onto each of the taxiways. You will figure that out yourself using your airport diagram. If your taxi route involves crossing runways, you will also be instructed whether you are allowed to cross those runways or if you must hold short of them. Even if a runway is not in use, you will still need that clearance from the controller. Controllers can only clear airplanes to cross one runway at a time. So, if your route involves crossing more than one, you will not be cleared to cross any of the additional runways until you have already crossed the first one. When in doubt, hold short of runways and ask ground if you have clearance to cross. Here is a typical clearance you might receive from Daytona Ground.
Daytona Ground, roll 915, holding short at Romeo 1, ready to taxi.
915 Daytona Beach Groundway 7, left intersection November 4, taxi via November crossing 16.
You will need to write down the taxi instructions, read them back to ground control, and then brief the taxi route with other crew members to avoid any confusion and confirm any hold short instructions. While taxiing, always have your airport diagram out for reference and follow along as you taxi. Taxiing at unfamiliar airports without a diagram can be confusing and could result in a deviation from your ATC taxi clearance, or worse yet, a runway incursion. Taking the time to understand the markings and signs at an airport will make following your taxi instructions easier. When in doubt, stop the aircraft and ask ATC for help.